Hi Gina.
Hi Ione, hi everyone. I'm Gina, the senior editor of Polyester.
And I'm Ione, the founding editor-in-chief of Polyester, and this is the Polyester Podcast, a feminist pop culture podcast dissecting the discourse on a weekly basis.
Before we start, if you're a fan of this podcast, please make sure to like, rate, subscribe and review. And if you really love us, you can sign up for a podcast membership, where you can join our WhatsApp chat, get access to our research each week, and get on our Instagram close friends for only £3 a month. We also now have a Substack called Non-Threatening Boys *, where we will be sharing exclusive content once a week on the Boy of the Hour. Do we have any reviews, Ione?
We do.
It does.
5 stars. Easy to listen, digestible deep dives. I enjoy your succinct, well-informed cultural deep dives. Hello from LA. That is by You Better Dork. Thank you. And then Freya Esther Davies on Spotify said, highlight of my Monday commute, which is very, very kind. And then some little, no, I was about to go not there. Someone being mean to you said asterisk, not asterix.
I know, bloody humbled.
Doesn't really matter, does it?
You know what I'm trying to say anyway, and I've got a thick regional accent, so I'll
if
say
you
what
can
I
understand it, then it's not a problem.
Tell them.
And if it's not offensive.
Very diplomatic. We're going to have a slew of horrible reviews, I think, from last week.
Why?
Because people are already kicking off loads.
No.
And what I'm saying is, if you like us, you should leave us a good one just
That's
in case.
true. I think a lot of people agree with us.
I think, yeah, the silent investors.
But you can't please everyone.
Famously,
You
can't. And what I and you try best to do is to please the people who matter. Please the people who we care about. And
those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter.
Famously.
So, today we are talking about, drumroll please, Gina Tonic's book.
I love you should edit in like doors slamming and me so like fight. You know when people used to do those videos where it was like Redbone but there's a fight in the room next door.
Yeah, but Gina, that is actually something you do, so I don't know how funny it is.
Well, that's why I do it for comedic effect.
No, you don't. You do it for dramatic effect.
Sometimes
no one finds it funny.
You never heard of like a dramedy?
I was thinking about what I'm gonna write for your maid of honour speech, and I was like,
you should just walk out.
Get a taxi to Wales.
Get a taxi to Wales.
Gina famously loves to say she's getting a taxi to Wales when she's annoyed on a night out. Not even a night out, sometimes at work events. Most of the time at work events.
If I've had a bit too much to drink and I've humiliated myself, what's a better route to go down than to call my mum and threaten that I'm going to get a taxi home to Wales?
And with that, we are now going to find out why she is the way she is.
Everyone welcome my mother. Can you imagine?
Oh, it'd be amazing if Vicky came on.
Big Vic.
I'd be so happy. She's a woman of few words, though.
She's shy of the mouth but expressive of
the face.
Social media.
Not good on podcasts.
Not good for podcasts. She's got a face for TV.
Yeah, beautiful.
Cool.
Silent.
Anyway, she's one of the main characters in my new book out last Thursday.
Is she?
Oh, she's in it a bit, yeah. Why haven't you read it?
I haven't read it. I was going to say she's the main character.
She's at the beginning.
Yeah, I guess.
When it's going through like my childhood.
Anyway, tell us about your book, Gina.
So Greedy Guts is a memoir that I've written as part of my life. I'm silly mood now. It's a memoir about my life, picking out the key moments that have been defined by my fatness, be that for good or for wickedness, and analysing the place of fat liberation currently.
Where fat liberation is currently?
Yeah, where it is currently, where it would have been helpful to have in the past.
Right. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get a book?
How did I get a book? Well, I only got a book. And then people were like, wow, the Polyester Girls or something about them. And I got approached by an agent's assistant, had a meeting with the agent, was like, cool, I'd want to do a book with you. Then it kind of really didn't go anywhere. Then I got approached by a different agent who I'm with now, Megan, from Bergstrom Studios. She approached me and was like, look, we're a boutique agency who primarily look after women, looking to tell their stories. We think you'd be a great fit. The owner is Welsh. So I was like, ding, 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 ding.
Is she?
Yeah, she's from Newport.
Wow.
I know. And then, good. Abigail Bergstrom, by the way, if you wanted to Google. And then
she has a book out and one coming out soon.
Yeah, she's very good. And then I went with her. We worked on the idea together. It got pitched to different publishing houses. There was 2 who wanted it. I went with the one that was swaggiest, obviously. And here we are. And then it took about 2 to 3 years to write.
Yeah.
From getting it signed off to getting all the edits done to getting it rolled out.
I think for you, writing was one of the quickest bits. Well, for most people, writing is the quickest bit.
Yeah, the writing was, I found, the least laborious part of it for sure. I think putting together a proposal was really difficult because in the past when I've written things, I kind of like just didn't have so rigid a plan of like what I was going to do, like just kind of like seeing where it went, especially for, I think, personal essays, which had kind of been my bread and butter online in journalism for a long time. So I was used to the process of writing and finding my conclusions on the way, whereas like when you put together a book proposal specifically for non-fiction, you have to have those like points ready, done and dusted.
So Greedy Guts follows different moments in your life that have been pivotal to you. What are some of those moments?
There's the time that my mum shaved my head before I started year 7.
That's a bit of an over-conflation, isn't it?
Well, the thing about comedy is exaggerating.
She gave you a short back and sides.
Yeah, all the chapters are called like the time that XYZ happened. So there's like the time that my mum gave me a short back and sides, the time that I fucked a fat fetishist, the time that I got diagnosed with PCOS, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And those are the chapter titles.
And what made you pick the stories that you picked?
I think I kind of worked backwards. So I was like, what's all the different points about fat liberation that I feel are under discussed and also that I have something to say on, and then like backtrack to how that would, moments in my life that would be able to convey those stories better.
What are the bits of fat liberation that you think are under discussed?
I think the way the medical industry really maltreats fat people, I think that especially like things like the death rate and statistics in that, like I think it can read so dry sometimes, whereas like if you've got like a story of someone's me, if you've got a story of me having like a shit time in a doctor's office and then like the leading that to detail like into those statistics but told in like a funny way, it's a lot easier to digest and a lot easier to get riled up against. I think when you just like face loads of statistics, it can be hard to like personalize that. So I really wanted to do that. And then I think really sexuality as well was a big one that I wanted to go into. I think not enough people talk about like the way that fat people are desexualized and overly sexualized at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And how is that?
How
are they desexualized and overly sexualized?
Well,
and also why does that matter, I guess?
So desexualization is where fat people are robbed of their sexual agency as people, like they're just seen as non-sexual beings, and like through that people are dehumanized. And then over-sexualization is dehumanization again, but from the point where you're objectified. So like you're objectified to the point of being seen as other than a person. You're seen as just like this fetish object.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to speak about both these things because I think sexuality is so imbued in our culture now, especially with the rise of like OnlyFans and stuff like that, and people really selling themselves on like these singular statistics of facets of themselves that can be fetishized. And I think like not enough people have dug into like how those experiences of being an object of fetish feels as someone who's gone through that on a personal level. And both good and bad, to be honest. Like in that chapter, there's 3 instances where I'm like, this is the time I had really good fat fetish sex. Here's a time where I had like medium, it didn't really affect me, but like it's worth like analysing. And then one time where like I got sexually assaulted by it. So I'm like, I think there's just a nuance to these conversations that I think that aren't really dug into. People go one side of the coin or the other. Mm-hmm. I think that's something we go into on the podcast a lot as well, is like that grey area and being a bit more nebulous about what these things mean.
Yeah, definitely. What was one story that you ended up cutting from the book or from the proposal?
From the proposal? None of them. They all made it, baby.
That can't be true.
I was clear and concise.
No, there must have been something where you were like, oh, I want to write about that, and then you decided not to include it.
I don't think I did.
Why?
Because I was clear and concise.
That's crazy.
I think I just was, I think because word count wise, they gave me like a really high word count that I wasn't comfortable with achieving. So they kept
What was it?
70k.
Okay.
And I was like, I just had never done long form writing before in my life.
That's not true.
What do you mean?
Wasn't your dissertation long-form fiction writing?
Yeah, but I'm not done long-form non-fiction writing then.
Okay.
So I was really intimidated by it, so I was just trying to like cram as much shit in there as possible, and that's why there's like 2 opening chapters and 2 closing chapters, because I was like, fuck, I need it. But I don't think like anything from it should be cut. I think it all tells like an overarching narrative. Like it begins why I'm doing it, goes into the different things, and then like ends with like a more like overall look at what I've just said. So I don't think that I've like stuffed it full of shite basically, but I think that like I was for like it was a bit touch and go on what I needed to include, I guess.
What do you mean?
Like thinking about like I'm just too like concise. Like I'm just too like I can get it bang on the money with
get to the point very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like I think writing this I got to experience like allowing yourself the freedom to be a bit flowery or also go off on like tangents and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed. I think is more fun.
Who's the person that you're most scared of reading the book?
Well, my mum read it all in like, I sent it to her when I'd finished it before it even been edited, and she read it all in a cupboard in work in 3 hours. Yeah. And then I was like, why the fuck did you do that? And you meant to be saving lives. But then she was like, I just wanted to make sure you hadn't been really horrible to me. And I was like, why would I? But I think like, yeah, that was probably the most intimidating. She keeps telling all our family members that it's really raunchy. So they're all prepared to read it. So I think there's no one that I'm scared to read it apart from maybe like people on the right or people who are like so violently fatphobic who will try and pick it apart and be like, here's like all the reasons that this girl is evil or a mess or disgusting or all the things that we all get called all the time.
I guess part of your writing though is like embracing the messiness, like not pretending to be like this perfect fat person. So why do you feel like it's important to do that?
I think it's important to do that because that's how real life is. Like whenever, especially in like the beginnings of body positivity, I'd see all these people being like, I love myself, I love my fatness, like listing all the ways that they love themselves and feeling like not represented by that, because I was like, I'm really struggling with a lot of like internalized fat phobia, disordered eating, external fat phobic sources. Like why would I love myself just like unabashedly in the face of that? Like I was very thinking these people were either liars or like just like the coolest people ever. So I just wanted to create that representation where it's like, no, it's not like life isn't like that. You can't like yourself all the time. But that doesn't mean like you're any less of a fat liberationist.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, how do you toe the line between like being honest about your own experiences without falling into like stereotypes of them, if that makes sense?
I guess because if you're talking about an individual experience, I don't think it can be a stereotype.
I think it can.
Go on.
Well, I can't think of an example off the top of my head. Why would I be able to think of that? That's crazy.
No, but like explain what you mean.
Like, for example, let me try and think of one. Like, for example, if you're like, oh, I don't know, fat people love takeaways, and you do love takeaways.
Famously love takeaways.
Yeah. So, like, I guess what I mean is, how do you toe the line between being honest without feeding into, like, negativity, if that makes sense? Or things that are used against fat people. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. For example, if people are like, I'm trying to think of, like, a chronic illness one. I guess it's, like, the lazy argument with chronic illness. It's like, oh, chronically ill people are lazy, and it's like,
I think something that I try and bring up in the book, and like I think we always bolster on each other, is like, you deserve like being treated as a human regardless of if you tick those stereotypes.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important part of your book and your writing as well, definitely. Let's go to a break. We're back.
Hi.
Bonjour. So the first time I remember you talking about this book was 2021.
Yes.
I remember where we were.
Where were we?
We were shooting the Valentino print scene.
Yes.
It was the day that we had Rosa and Kenzie in.
Yes, I remember that.
And I feel like through that time, which is obviously like coming up to 4 years ago, a lot has changed with body positivity and the like landscape of fatness. And it seems as though being fat is like probably the worst it's ever been right now. Yeah. Not ever. Like, obviously that's hyperbolic, but like in our adult lives.
No, I think not even hyperbolic. Maybe like compared to, because I think it's worse that we got to see like, oh no, it could be good times ahead.
But we actually fucking hate you.
Yeah, but, we were all lying and joking and laughing at your expense. Like, it makes it feel even more like hopeless when you're like, oh, we actually got these steps made and now it's being rolled back. And I think I feel that across the board for all marginalisation things at the minute.
But I guess zooming in on fatness, listeners of this podcast will obviously be familiar with like weight loss injections and their pervasiveness across our culture at the moment because we speak about it. But zoom out, like how is it bad now, worse than it's ever been? Like what knock-on effect does that have, I guess, on fatness? Like the fact that everyone, like you can have a drug to be skinny and like the fact that skinniness is back or whatever, how does that actually affect fat people? Like I think it's just a general mood. Like even before Ozempic was as widespread as it is now, I feel like after COVID people were like, being skinny is back. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was like thin is in, runways are thin again.
Which is also interesting because like COVID was probably a time when a lot of people put on weight because we were in the house.
It's because everyone fucking hates themselves, isn't it? So they're like, oh, thin is in. It makes them feel more emboldened to lose the weight if that's what's happening.
Expand. But I mean, I understand that. Like, I think it's quite easy to grasp that like people don't want to be fat because we're told that like fatness is like bad morally and aesthetically and in terms of desirability. But what does the landscape currently look like in terms of that, and what effect, like material effect, does that have on fat people and non-fat people?
I think it's wholly having a negative effect. Like people think these things happen in a vacuum and they don't. Like it's all combines to one. Like I think there was such like a move to like people wanting to be healthy again after the pandemic, and fatness is so easily misappropriated to being like seen as unhealthy that it made sense that people wanted to move away from that, as well as like the worry of getting ill. So I think that's kind of like where the genesis of it was. I also think that there was a push from the far right as well. Like it's an easy one to knock down people's progression on, like progressive thinking on, because it's so pervasive. So I think it was like a really easy first win for the right to be like, nah, fuck these fat people, like look at them on the billboards, look at this, like it shouldn't be happening. And that's kind of like how the right's gotten into government, by like this the first domino to fall, I think, was fatness being seen as bad again, and then it kind of like all carried on from that. Like when they're like all like the death of woke, and people are like openly just being like racist to British ministers on Twitter and stuff now. And people are like, a few years ago, like you would get locked up for saying shit like this. Like you wouldn't even be allowed to say stuff like that in a public forum. And I do think like it stems from once you knock down like the easiest marginalization that people can like people on the right will maybe like have like a divisive opinion, not a divisive opinion on, but a similar opinion to you on, is so much easier to then knock down the other barriers towards like that end goal of like getting rid of marginalized people having a space or a voice in society.
Yeah, I guess I kind of agree and disagree. I think it's like twofold in a way, because I think like fat people are systemically mistreated in healthcare, etc., etc., etc. But then I feel like you can't really have that. I would say that like disabled people have been mistreated throughout the whole thing.
Definitely, like 100%. They were probably the first domino to fall, and then fatness and then whatever. But the thing is, like that's this kind of thinking isn't even like necessarily worth following down the rabbit hole, because we're all in it together. Like it's it needs to be solidarity rather than being like
it's this or this.
Yeah, it's this or that. But I do think like fatness is such an easy one for people to push over to get right-wing thinking into people's minds. And I think that it's just going to carry on. Like fat people and disabled people are always a scapegoat for these kinds of things. Like they're shutting down the NHS, but there's also a campaign at the same time saying that like fatness is the leading cause of cancer. It's like it's hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I talk about a lot in my book, I guess, about like individualization of medical and medicalization of our societies that allow us to strip our healthcare back because everyone thinks that like their only responsibility is themselves, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I loved about your book so much, is like the focus on community being like the way that we get out of this mess.
But then I guess it's like, why is it important? Because I feel like a lot of people with the injections as well are like, oh, in 10 years there won't be any fat people. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think that's, well, obviously it's not true, because like there's class barriers to Ozempic.
Exactly.
But then also fat people will exist because they have always existed and will always exist. Like it's a very, like, they're not just going to disappear. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think that's what's really worries me about the GLP-1 injections and the way that they're being marketed to us is because number one, loads of them are using like girl boss marketing, being like, girly goo, it's not your fault, it's the obesity is something that you can treat, and we all understand now that that's like a medical issue that you were struggling with, and like we've got the treatment for you, and like it's all gonna be solved, bestie. And it's so like jarring and grating because it's just, again, like so dehumanizing to turn something that's such like a characteristic of my life and the life of the fat community and turn it into something that's a symptom of an illness. Like it becomes, again, like even more medicalized, and I think that's something that more and more people need to talk about when it comes to fatness, is the way that we use the medicalization of it to make it seem immoral, like over and over and over again. And when I was doing the research for my book, I was reading Fear in the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. It's an amazing book, and she talks about where fat phobia came from and how it's really, really rooted in racism, basically. And in that, she talks about how in the beginning, like fat phobia came about because of a class division. Like they wanted to make it so the philosophers of the time, the high courts, were saying, well, fat people are lazy and they're like uneducated, and it's because that they give in to these base animalistic instincts. They don't know when to stop themselves from eating. They don't know how to restrict themselves. And they were saying like the best thinkers of our time can restrict themselves. The best thinkers of our time don't even need to eat so much, because when they eat, they're using their body's energy to process that food. Whereas like if they eat less, then they use their body's energy to use their minds, which is A, bogus, but B, like really crazy that something that's just like a philosophical idea from like the 1800s has led it to a whole medical industry where most of the time any fat person goes in to talk about their anything that's going on with them medically, it's just equated to fatness. It hasn't got roots in medicine to begin with.
No, exactly. And I think it's also that we're in now, like fast forwarding to that, like fat phobia still kind of has the same root of it, where it's like, oh, you just don't know how to control yourself, or you don't exercise enough. But we live in this weird friction where it's like most celebrities that we see on Instagram are skinny, toned, work out, restrict their eating, but then also post indulgent things a lot, like big plates of pasta, or like eating loads of ice cream. I don't know why ice cream is in my head. Or like getting on it, or like, you know, having these like lavish luxury experiences. So I feel like we're in this weird place where food is not a status symbol. I don't really know the word for it, but as in like people want to be seen to enjoy themselves with food, but they don't want that to show on their body.
Yeah, it's a very like oxymoronic thing what's happening that we're seeing in real time, especially as like the actual physical price of everyday basics is going up and up and up, making it to the point where like food is something that's
a commodity.
Yeah, a commodity.
Well, it's just making me think of that. Do you know what I'm gonna say?
No.
That video of Gabrielle holding the spaghetti at the post-Grammy thing, where she's like picking up plates of spaghetti and she's obviously fucked out her head, and then she's feeding it to one of their mates.
Yeah, it's such like pisshead behaviour, and people were really intellectualising it, but then
it's also kind of like what it kind of reminds me of is like Henry VIII behaviour. Do you know what I mean? Like these are like the upper echelons, and they can like gorge themselves silly but not actually eat, and like have these feasts and stuff. But then where fat phobia really, like the people that experience the harshest effects of fat phobia are like working class people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, because they're always the scapegoat, like, oh, look at them, they're fat, they can't get off their lazy ass or whatever. Whereas, like, rich people can basically just, like, live all of those worlds at once and never be criticised.
Yeah, it's like when Kim got a private jet to France to have, like, her favourite pastry. It's weird that what we need to survive, it's just so, like, enrobed in class as well. Like, there's no fat phobia without class, I don't think.
No, definitely. Well, and racism and class, because like going back to the origins of it, it was like a lot linked to like slave labour as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, and like depicting specifically like African people.
Yeah,
they were going over
African women as well, specifically.
Exoticizing them, overly sexualizing them. In the book's amazing, Fear in the Black Body, and then it goes into like how it flipped on its head really suddenly, and they were like, this is the opposite of what people want to look like. This is based, they're animalistic, like they don't know what they're doing. Of course they're gonna like, they're famished, they're just gonna eat everything that they can get a hold of, and then it flips around and it's like, oh no, they're like fat and they're disgusting and they're naturally corpulous and all this. And it's just like over and over again, like these conversations just become like cyclical ways of just promoting the same thing.
Do you think it would ever switch back? Like, I remember before there was the like semaglutide injections, I was like, well, surely it will have to flip again, because like everyone, like, it's like how someone left a comment on our podcast reel yesterday where it's like, oh, it's not useful to speak in class, it's useful to speak in like laptop class and non-laptop class. So like, do you work from a laptop or not? Because we're going back to, like there being like physically laborious jobs and there being like non-physically laborious tasks, which is an indicator of class. So I was like, oh, it'll go back because like working class people are more likely to do like labor-based tasks. And so they're the ones that are going to be fit. But I guess we've probably reached a point now where it's too complicated because people schedule in physical exercise into their day, and also we have medicine. Thoughts?
I just think thinness is always going to be a status symbol because it's something that can only be achieved through wealth, really, unless it is, like hard graft.
Always.
Unfortunately. And I think that when you set the goal as something that's so hard to achieve for most people as well, like people who are naturally fat, people who are naturally maybe like mid-size, people who are naturally like not mid-size, people who don't have the body shape that reflects their thinness in the specific ways, like it gets so convoluted the more closer to thinness you get as well, because like there's so many different wrong and right ways of thinness, which kind of makes me happy I'm a fat cunt, because I'm like, God, don't worry, I don't have to worry about having like a turd in the twink chamber.
Fuck's sake.
I've never experienced that in my life.
I know.
I've never woken up being like, wow, I had a big meal last night and I can see it in myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think thinness will always be a goal because it's a symbol of wealth, which is a shame. But I do think that we are going to be due back like a body positivity renaissance. I watched like an interview with RuPaul, which is obviously not a very reputable source, but he's on it. He's on it being like, yeah, like in my career, like we've just, because obviously like drag's been banned and everything, he's been interviewed about that, and he's like being like, well, every like decade or 2 decades there's a window where like people become really, really liberal and like progressive for a bit. He's like, I remember it happened in the 70s, I remember it happened in the 90s, it just happened now. And the thing about that is like rubber band theory, like
it snaps back.
It has to snap back, because otherwise like what, it breaks and then we're all like free for all, get to do whatever we want, like the patriarchy's over. It's never going to happen.
Well, I guess that's what upsets me though.
No, I love it.
Like, I'm sick of the world just being like, yeah, this cyclical thing where it's like, it's bad, then it's good, then it's bad, then it's good. It's like, why can't it just be good?
I think that's part of growing up.
But why would you say that thinness is explicitly conservative?
I think because working class people maybe don't have the capacity to A, worry about it.
No.
B,
conservative, not middle and upper class.
Conservative?
Yeah.
Why is thinness conservative? I think there's an obsession with restriction on the conservative side of life. Mm-hmm. It's moralised to restrict. Mm-hmm. And restriction is automatically associated with thinness. And I think it's because of that, restriction and thinness are associated with virtuousness. And that's kind of like what conservative people are pushing, is like to be the most virtuous, even though they are usually the most dastardly.
And why is that wrong?
Because it's not virtuous. There's no moral to be applied to a body shape. Be serious.
Yeah.
Like, break it down. Like, you think that you're better than someone because you've got less leg meat. What do you want about?
I do think that's part of it though, because I feel like some people have to like gratify their own worth that way. Do you know what I mean? Because like, I feel like when body positivity fell so easily, it became obvious that, or like just things people say to me sometimes, and I'm like, that they were only accepting of it from like a pity point of view rather than actually believing it. Do you know what I mean?
It's a game of privilege, isn't it? Like, if you're working hard to achieve this privilege, because it's one of the few privileges that can be achieved if you spend enough money, time and energy on it, then to be told like, no, girl, the whole system's a sham. Like, why have you wasted all that time, energy, money, thought, probably fucking tortured yourself for so long? As soon as you're told, like, that's pointless, like, I'm just as confident, happy as you, that's like when these people get so angry and so irate and want to have like, need that privilege system to exist in order to like justify themselves, like the way that they live their lives.
It's true.
That's why people get so angry when, like, there's, like, a girl online who's got, like, a really sexy husband and she's fat.
Yeah, 100%.
People go fucking apeshit and be like, as if she's got with him, and like, girl, like, it's such a separate...
It's like, I deserve what she has because I look better than
Because I've tried harder. Yeah, I've tried harder. And that's the thing, like, what are you trying for? You're trying to conform. Like, your aim is to conform to those goals, and I understand why anyone would want to conform to thinness. I've definitely fallen into that trap multiple times, and I really do, like, understand, like, the act of being like, you know what, this one, guys, I can't face it. I need to, like, cash it in, and just for my own sanity to not be, like, so suffering so much anymore. I really do understand it, and I talk about that in the book.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you do really need to understand that what you were doing is, like, conforming.
Yeah.
Like, you're selling out. Like, you're not actually being like... Because the worst kind of thin person is the person who used to be fat and is like, look how much better my life got from being thin.
Defo.
And it's because I went to the gym every day. It's like, no, babe. It's because you attributed to the hierarchy and climbed the ladder.
Yeah.
And I can't climb that ladder because I'm just too big.
Yeah.
The rings will snap.
And with that, why should everyone read Greedy Guts?
If you like a good time, if you like to feel good about yourself, if you like a little cry as well as a little laugh, and also you have 20 quid burning a hole in your pocket, please take yourself down to your nearest local bookshop, get yourself on the link in my bio, and get yourself a copy of Greedy Guts.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Thank you, Ione, for being so amazing to me during this process as well. It's meant the world to me.
Oh, no. Well done for writing it. It's a masterpiece.
I hope so. And when I did the audiobook, I was like, some of this is shit.
Oh, I hate doing audiobooks. So, no, I feel like it's actually a unique type of torture to have to hear yourself speak back, especially, like, writing.
Yeah, I was like...
speaking back your writing is so crazy.
I was like, some of this is tosh. Text me if you've got
enough,
to
cut the mics. Cut the mics. We're trying to sell books.
But, buy the book and then tell me what you didn't like. Oh, and if you want to order it as well, it's in our podcast description.
Absolutely.
And you should, while you're there...
Oh my God.
Order Ione's book.
That's true. Great companion piece.
Some would say us sisters. Also, we're doing a conversation together in London soon.
Yeah, soon. We'll post it.
We'll collab post it or something.
And if you want to talk to us about books, then you can join our podcast membership tier.
Yeah, or our silver or gold membership tier.
Exactly. Well, okay. Thank you, Olivia, for editing. Thank you to Charlotte for sound teching and Sneha for sound teching too. We will see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you, guys.
Bye!